We help aspiring kettlebell coaches become confident as kettlebell practitioners and educators in only 10 weeks. If you want to find out more about our method, check the first link in the description and sign up for our waiting list. All right, ladies and gentlemen, another episode of the Kettle Nights podcast. And I have with me today my main man, Nick Tuminello. Tuminello, Italiano, see?
Yeah,
You
well,
just smile.
I just joke. I say I'm fake Italian. I'm Olive Garden Italian. I wasn't really raised speaking Italian or with any sort of the heritage aspect of things.
All right. But you know, I live in Switzerland, so right to the south is Italy. I have some Italian friends, so of course I know Tuminello. That's Italiano, see?
Yeah. So you might not have understood my joke when I say Olive Garden Italian. Olive Garden is like a really crappy chain restaurant of Italian food here that nobody thinks is really Italian. So That's my joke.
Okay, I got it. So I got to finish the introduction for Nick. I've been following Nick for a long time on various social media, especially on Facebook. And Nick's been around for a very, very long time. And he's an OG when it comes to being a coach. So that's one of the main reasons why I wanted to get him on and have a conversation with him, because us youngins, us Padawans, we need to listen to the OGs, how they did it. And then, of course, we want to carve out our own field and our own way. That's what we want to do. But the idea is listening to the folks who have been before us and who are paving the way. So, Nick, welcome to the podcast.
I appreciate it, man. Well, I'm still very much in the field. I love this stuff. I'm still a trainer. So it keeps my finger on the pulse, and I don't ever just want to be someone who stomps around on stages or teaches trainers on YouTube or whatever social media platforms and doesn't actually still train clients. So I still train clients part-time, about 20 hours a week.
Awesome. And it's one of the things that I always like to keep in mind when it comes to our business and the way things are going right now is to always, as you said it, keep the finger on the pulse, make sure your skill is always sharpened, because working with people, this is actually where you get the biggest experience from, right? That's not something that you can get from a book. Is working with people, actually seeing the differences in how they move, how they act, what it's like to work with different folks. So most definitely. So Nick, can you give us a little bit of your background, where you're coming from?
Sure. I mean, I'll try to summarize it, because obviously I get asked this. I've been doing podcasts for 20 years and people want to learn something. They don't necessarily want to hear all my background. So I'll try to be as fast as I can. My mom was a bodybuilder in the early 80s, so she literally raised me inside of a gym. I saw her train around professional wrestlers, NFL players in the early 80s. I saw guys literally do steroids. It was like a hardcore gym in the 80s. So then I became an athlete, really got into wrestling in high school and middle school, which is a big thing here in the U.S. That drove me into fitness and wanting to, get bigger. Obviously, it was getting my bench press up, get my arms bigger, all the typical stuff a teenage boy would be. But I found something different in me that's carried over to this day, is that I became obsessed with becoming the most useful person in the gym. I mean, not a tall guy. I'm barely 5'6". I'm not a big heavyweight guy. I never really cared about powerlifting. I'm not saying I disrespect it. I mean, personally, I never followed powerlifting. I wasn't obsessed with bodybuilding and never wanted to be a bodybuilder. I always just wanted to be healthy, fit, functional, but still look pretty good in my T-shirt and out of my T-shirt, right? So I eventually got into combat sports. So that drove me to become obsessed. I read every bodybuilding magazine I could. I read every book that I could get from my library. As I got older, became a trainer, I knew I wanted to be a trainer at 18 years old, which at the time it wasn't considered a real job. I was like the generation right before it was like considered a real job.
That's amazing. Pioneers.
And I bought, and I'm going to date myself now, but at the time I was coming up, DVDs were still a thing. We're still around but the VHS tapes were like still around, but they were like all the companies were trying to get rid of them, right? Because it's like, okay, nobody's buying VHS anymore. We got DVD. So I would buy all the VHS tapes because I could get them at a discount and watch them at every person I could get. Paul Chek, JC Santana, Vern Gambetta. I was even watching old Nautilus stuff, and I just was obsessed with it. And I realized that as I became up as a trainer, I would go to conferences. I spent thousands of dollars, bro, thousands of dollars a year going to conferences. This is, YouTube was around, social media was around, but it was more like chat rooms and forums.
Mm-hmm.
I never liked that. I don't communicate well that way. I wanted this, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I would come home and I would talk to other trainers, and nobody knew who the heavy hitters were at the time, right? And I was like, how do you not know who these people are? Are you not paying attention? And I realized that, and this is going to sound self-gratifying, it is what it is. I realized that I wasn't like other trainers. I realized most trainers, they either graduated school or they just got their CPT, and then they maybe read Arnold Schwarzenegger's Encyclopedia of Bodybuilding and read some magazine, and then they thought they knew everything. Or maybe they did a bodybuilding show or a powerlifting meet, and they like didn't keep learning. And I went like, what are you doing, man? How do so, and I still feel like that to this day, man. I go to conferences when I teach and I attend classes, and I'm talking to the other instructors and I'm asking them, what do you think about this? I am that guy that, waits at the end of the class to come up to the instructor and has a list of questions where everybody else just leaves and go to lunch. Like I'll be, if I catch you at a conference, talk to you, like, where are you learning from, man? What do you think? What do you think about this? What do you think about that?
Mm-hmm.
I'm always I'm obsessed with this shit. I love this shit. And
Mm.
so I think it's a personal thing for me. I just always want to be one of the best trainers excuse my language, be one of the best trainers in the fucking world. And I still have that fire. I don't, so I think that's more interesting to people than just, I started as a trainer. I had my own gym. I got some awards, all true. But,
Yeah.
I want to know what drove, I want you to know what
Mm.
drove me for that.
Mm. Do you think this is one of the most important traits that a trainer should have nowadays?
I don't know about that. I mean, I know plenty of trainers. Listen, I'm a real guy. At the same time, I'm not going to be self-gratifying to say that you have to be like me. One of the things that really
Mm-hmm.
ticked me off about a lot of people that coming up is that, if it took them 20 years to write their first book, and I was able to write my first book after, 5 years of being known, even though I'd been a trainer for 10 years prior, they thought, oh, this young guy, he can't be good enough because it took me 20 years. So it's like, well, F you,
Mm-hmm.
man. I accelerated my growth. I bought all your DVDs. I'm supposed to be further ahead of you.
Mm-hmm.
So, I'm supposed to be accelerated. So, I think that as long as you're a good connector, communication is one thing. Connection is what you do with your communication. That's the number one thing. And I don't think you need to be a super advanced biomechanist, neuro this. And as long as you understand basics of how to keep people safe and interested in progressing, I think that's all you need to know. And that's what I've been obsessed with, by the way. I've not been obsessed with reading studies just for the sake of reading studies. I don't care about p values and all this nerd stuff. In fact, I've always talked to my scientific friends about, just tell me what the studies are finding. I'll go look it up if I don't trust you. But don't tell me the studies. Tell me what you interpret from the studies. Tell me what I can use from the studies. So I think you need to have knowledge, and you can certainly go past the average trainer. But the passion is the one thing, the connection, to stay connected with people is what I mean, passion.
Yeah. Yeah.
And third, I would say, is continue to learn about ways you can make the clients you work with better, not not become a hobbyist. So I'm going to kind of go into a small rant here, but I always was client centered. I always wanted to be notice I said I want to be the best trainer. I never cared about being the best lifter in my area. Never cared about being the best fighter. I did kickboxing. I did wrestling. I knew that wasn't going to make me money. It wasn't what I was passionate about. I like to do it and I like to be competent at it. But I do feel like some trainers, the ones who are passionate, tend to only focus on what they like. So if you're a kettlebell guy, you tend to go to all the kettlebell conferences and all the kettlebell certifications. And then what happens? Every client that you train becomes the kettlebell client, even though they may have told you, I want a nicer ass and bigger arms. Kettlebells are probably not the best way to do that. I'm not saying you can't incorporate them, but squats, deadlifts, hip thrusts, a lot of bicep curls and variations. So sometimes I feel like trainers try to make people mini versions of them because that's what the trainer is always taking in. So I think that education should be diverse. You should learn, from physical therapists, from other people in fitness, and also not just from strength coaches, by the way. You should learn from everyday trainers who train everyday people. Because strength coaches, man, they got hostages. We got volunteers.
Hostages. Yes, I see that. Um, while I do 100% see your point, and here's my perspective, and I wonder what you make out of this.
Sure.
So I was the way I started was I was in the gym, the typical fitness instructor, unlike everybody else, right? Gravitated towards Arnold, gravitated towards bodybuilding. I mean, this is what, I mean, I'm a little bit younger than you, so in my case, I experienced VHS, but then DVD was big, and now, of course, we know where we are right now. So I totally loved the gym, but I felt like it mistreated people to a certain extent, where you see that most gyms, it's just all about signing the contract. That's it. And the rest,
sure.
we don't care, right? We don't care if people show up. We don't care if people change their lives. We don't care about results. We care about making sure that the client signs the contract and then get the retention rate as high as possible so that these people stay, so we can have the facility open while at the same time not producing results. And really got mad at this. I was like, this is a broken system. Okay, we are a facility that is part of the economy with a bad product, or let's say a below average product. So that's what drove me away from, not drove me away from fitness, but drove me away from the typical wanting my way to build myself up in the gym hierarchy, right? So I went out, and then I opened up my own gym, to make it very short. And then I gravitated towards kettlebells because I just fell in love with the tool. And then my Steve Carter is my mentor, so I really got into this. So I specialized in it as much as I can. And I've realized most of our clients, so I'm really focused in on the clients that we serve. So if somebody comes up to me, says, hey, I want to be all that muscle, this and that, I'm saying I'm not the proper guy. I'm not the right guy to help you. So I have specialized in a certain field where I help a certain group. And this is my specialty, and this is where I believe the kettlebell comes in very handy. But here's my thing, I got this idea from Dan John. He says, the problem in a movie, so he had a very great analogy. He says, the problem in the movie is always the same when a supplemental idea becomes central. So the way I look at it now is the kettlebell is my central game, right? Because this is where I want to build my legacy to a certain extent. And this is probably where we differ a little bit. I want to help people most definitely, but I also want to keep in mind that I want to build my legacy to a certain extent, and I don't want to be trainer 1924 around everybody else, right? So I want to leave my mark, so to speak. And so treating only a certain group of people with this type of training tool does not mean that I don't use barbells, that I don't use the dumbbell. For example, one of the best exercises, I believe, is a prowler, push and pull. So easy. Carries, walk around, low tech, very awesome. Build strength. It's a super exercise. For people who don't have a lot of kinesthetic literacy, who struggle with movement, just the basics where you get them to move very fast and very quick, where they don't feel like, I cannot do this. So while I do understand your point, I also see a certain incentive to specialize.
Yeah.
What's your take on this? What do you say?
Well, first off, I want to just say this very, very broadly, is the beauty of the field that we're in is that we have so many diverse viewpoints. I'm a free market person, not just when it comes to money, but free market of ideas. So I will say that if anybody's not familiar with me to this far, let me just say this. Many trainers we're used to a very sort of gang-like environment, and everybody, can you believe what this guy says? And this guy is an idiot, and this girl's an idiot. I'm not like that, man. I love talking to, first of all, I say this. I grew up in combat sports. I like intellectual debates and challenges. So I love talking to people who, I'm not saying we disagree. I'm just going to take it a little step further. I love the diversity of views, and I think there's a lot of ways to get it done. Your proof is in the pudding. You're a passionate trainer. You love what you do. You've had a lot of success with your clients. You have your own podcast. So I never think for a second that, my way or the highway. It can be my way or the highway if you work for me. You know what I mean? But outside of that, I don't try to. I love listening to different perspectives and things. Like, oh, okay, that's really cool. I can see where that is and whatnot. So So I totally get where you're coming from, and I'm not trying to convince anybody to be like me or to say my way is the best. I feel it's the best for me. That's that. So anyway, with that disclaimer said, um, I would say where I where I differ, and I think you should specialize. So the question is that what's best for you or what's best for business? I would say, and I would say that if you're trying to, it's obviously a tough business to be in as a trainer. Well, I live in South Florida. Everybody and their dog is a personal trainer or a real estate agent or both, right? It's the
Yes.
land. You go to Starbucks and
Yeah.
half the baristas are trainers, right?
Yes. Most definitely.
So yeah, you have to specialize, and you can't just say, "Well, I work with kids, and I do sports conditioning, and I do functional conditioning, and I do." Well, that means you suck at everything, right? I get it. I personally would not recommend. Notice how I'm very careful with my words. Someone specialized in a piece of equipment. I would specialize in people to specialize in solutions to a problem the free market has.
Oh.
Okay, so what I mean by that, here's an example. A lot of women want to get a bigger butt, right? So if you specialize in that, we see where that's gone, right? A lot of people want bigger arms. That is a common thing. People want to improve their bench press, squat, deadlift. That's a prop. People want to know, how do I train with bad knees, right? How do I reduce knee pain? These these are now the kettlebell and other things, barbells and bands and whatever else, are tools to get that job done. But I recommend specializing from a business perspective, because you will always have, the free market is determining there's demand for that. There's not too many people. Again, I'm not saying this. I'm not trying to piss on what you're doing. What I'm just speaking from a business
Yeah, yeah. Keep
perspective.
going. Keep going.
That not too many people are saying, I want to master the kettlebell. Usually those people are like you, and you're
Yes,
not
it's a
hiring
small.
another trainer,
It's a small
right?
niche. Yeah.
Yeah, once you've got coached up, now you want to go take that to other people. The question is teaching people, how does that improve? How does that solve a certain problem better than other things, right? So um, that's why now I'm going to pull back a little bit. Personally, if you're a passionate trainer and you love that yourself and people see that passion, then I think people dig that. And I think people like a new angle. They go, I've seen the kettlebells at the gym, but I don't really know how to do them. You know, Sometimes though, on the flip side, if people like the newness of it, what they hire you for is what they're going to fire you for. Actually, I learned that from an NFL coach years ago. Meaning in 3 or 4 months, now they're bored because it's not new anymore. So they're going to go seek the next new thing. Now it's going to be spinning. And then they're sick of spinning. And now it's going to go to this. So I said all that. Again, I'm
Wow.
going to keep
Yeah.
pulling back here.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you have, as a trainer, if you don't want to be the most passionate, best trainer who has no clients or has very few clients, while you look at the other trainers in your area, going back to your first thing you asked me about, what does a trainer need? We all know trainers who don't know their ass from a dumbbell, who've got people beating down their door to train with them, right? We got one we got one down the road here who's in a very prominent area, who I'm not gonna tell you who it is because it might give away, who somebody I know always shows me videos on Instagram, and I literally laugh. It's like comedy to me, and how dumb the things are that are. And I try to not be too judged. This stuff is ridiculous. Got people rolling in and out of there, right? So that's from a business perspective. So you need
Yeah.
the
I see
combo.
that. I see
You
that.
can have the passion, and you can love the passion for a device. But if you're not meeting the demand of
Yeah.
what the person wants, which is it fun? Do I feel like you're kicking my butt? Um, so all these things, then that's not necessarily sustainable as a business. So I think the combination of the two is what's most important, but usually meaning your own passion, what you're passionate about, and then what you can help other people achieve that they're going to put value on. And if you can find the combination there, and then the kettlebell is your main driver for that, great. I just feel like it's already a smaller niche within a niche. Now I have a couple other things to say about that, but I want to hear your feedback.
I see. And first of all, I'm. This is. I don't know if you watched episode. It went around. It went around the internet like wildfire. Fire. You don't have to be. You don't even have to be in comedy. But Shannon Sharp had a podcast conversation with Cat Williams, and this thing went around the internet. Have you seen this?
Which one was it? I'm probably have seen it. But...
Yeah, it was a conversation that is like a 2.5 hour conversation, and Cat Williams just spits like against Kevin Hart, against everybody else, and the internet exploded. So this video took off like crazy, like 50 million views, something in 5 or 6 days, like or 25. I'm exaggerating a little bit. So why I'm saying this is because I love what Cat told Shannon. He said, "You've established this as a place of truth." So that's exactly what I want to do. I do not care about, I have to say it like this. I don't care about emotions. I don't care about feelings. I care about the truth. So I think us trainers or people who are in the field, we should be allowed to talk about each other. We should not be allowed to disrespect each other. That's another thing. But if I see harm done by somebody else, I should be able to point it out and say, listen, I don't like, why? Well, give me your premise. Give me your argument. Give me your logic. So what I try to do is I love how you said this marketplace of ideas. So we sit on the table, we put all these ideas on the table, and the ideas that survive the onslaught of logic, these are the ideas that we're supposed to take home then, right? I cannot sit around and then have somebody have an argument that makes logical sense that goes against what I believe, and then still believe what I believe. Does that make sense? So that's the reason why I'm open to listen to everybody, because that's what I really don't like about the kettlebell sphere, is this dichotomy of thinking and this tribal mentality. For example, a swing is supposed to look like this because Pavel said it. Who cares? Right. Nobody cares about that. Nobody at all. Because I've talked to John Duquesne. And you know what John Duquesne told me? Pablo came up with the kettlebell one day and said, hey, you know what? This is what we're going to push now. So John said, you know what? We have to settle ourselves as the authority. Well, who sanctioned them? Nobody. Right. They decided. Yeah. They decided. So if they can decide to sanction themselves as authority, everybody else can, right? So while the logic makes sense that I see from the kettlebell sphere, from Pavel, Strong First, RKC, and everything, makes sense to a certain extent, but where it doesn't click with me, this is where I share my opinion. And I think it doesn't make sense from that perspective. So what you're saying is the way how I would pick it apart is bring the skill, be very proficient in a particular niche, let's put it like this. I consider myself proficient in the kettlebell, and then understand your target audience, where that skill might fit, and then make sure you connect it with some solid marketing.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah,
perfectly
right,
stated.
right. So yesterday I had a conversation with Professor Robert Roberts. He was one of the guys who pioneered the idea that lactate acid doesn't exist and that lactate actually is a good thing. Right, for 200 years, he said it was hypothesized that lactate was a bad thing, and then when he came up as a student, he was asking the professor because he was going down that route, and he found like that doesn't make sense. So he's now pioneering this work, and at the end of the conversation, he said, you know, it's a sad thing that so much misinformation is prevailing, and I said, well, I believe there's one simple explanation, and that is you have a lot of people with a lot of knowledge and skill, but they don't know the marketing.
Yeah.
Then you have people who don't have the skill, don't have the knowledge, but they're beasts at marketing. Of course, these guys are going to win, right? So what you're saying makes sense, most definitely.
Yeah, what we said is 100% in line with one another. My whole point, just to put a bow on that, and I want to address a couple other things you said, is which are all great points. Is that, you know, I would say a lot of trainers make the mistake. If I can bring this to some sort of advice, practical, what to do is. Don't let your own passion cause you to fail because you're not considering what the free market actually wants. And that's where a lot of 100%. Trainers are great trainer, bad business, right? You become like the jam band who, you know, you look at Green Day and you go, why are they so famous? Every song is like 3 chords and I can write, well, you didn't write it. And meanwhile, you're stuck at coffee shops and nobody knows your songs. So because you're playing for yourself, you're a performance for the performer. Most people don't care. They just want to dance.
Most
You know, they just
yes,
want to dance and sing,
yes,
right? So
yes.
now I will piggyback off of what I just said there to say sort of two things. One is personally, I never resonated, and this is why I never resonated with any of the barbell specialty, the kettlebell specialty, because my philosophy was always client first, solution based. How do I help people with knee pain, back pain, train around these things, enjoy the workout more? How do I incorporate regular variety without falling into randomness and stupidity? Because this is what people come to me for, and this is what people enjoy, right? How do I know that? I would always ask clients. People would stay. I had a client that stayed with me for 20 years. The only reason she left is because I moved out of the state. Is I go, why do you keep coming? They go, you don't hurt me, and you have a lot of variety. Now, I always had some consistent work in there because that's how we show progress. But I knew that if it's always monotonous, people go, why do I need you when this is boring? Right? This is a problem that
100%.
trainers deal with now. But again, it was client first, and I never saw. So back to why I don't resonate with the whole, powerlifting or kettlebell specialty or whatever. I think it's all good to know and be competent in, but I never took it a step further that way because I never saw that I needed that to accomplish the goals that I had, which are always client first. It was always like, yeah, I like kettlebell swings because it's a way to get people to jump without jumping, right? So maybe for people, if their jumps are a problem, maybe I can get them to do this thing, or it's another explosive variation. Or holding the kettlebell like this is an easy way to get you to counterbalance and get your torso up when you squat. It was more along the lines of it was a good tool to accomplish a job that I wanted to do. Then I want you to get good at this because I think this is awesome. I'm not saying that's how you train. I'm not saying that's how anybody else trains. Nobody has to defend, well, my coach doesn't. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that I see a lot of trainers interpreting it that way.
I see that.
All right. And they do it because it makes it easier on them. Hey, I'm not sure what to do. Now you've given me this template. Now I'm going to make that template fit everybody else. It does make it easier on you. And I think the difference there is this is where the learning comes in is once you start learning from different people, as you said, you become a little more comfortable in not knowing things and asking questions
Yeah,
and deciding what's the best direction. So that's where the knowledge comes
100%.
in. Now,
100%.
I want to move into something that I think is really prevalent to now. You talked about, you know, challenging ideas and talking with people, and you should better call out things. You didn't use that terms, but that's basically what you were saying. I would say you can do whatever you want, right? But I would say two issues with that because I've dealt with this for a while. When I started out, I'm a nice guy, but I'm highly confrontational. I love to I love to argue, I love to debate, I love to catch people and to a point where it can be annoying. I've learned how to pull it back. All right. I've learned how to pull it back. Um, so, but I would say this, I'm going to put it on myself for a second because as I started getting more known, then I started getting those things pointed at me. And I have no problem. I'm not above being challenged, but I started to see a pattern here. And the pattern was okay, you, meaning me, you posted this thing for free on your Facebook. Now, I, meaning somebody else, I don't agree with it. Right. And maybe sometimes it's not even the fact that you feel like my facts are off. Maybe you just don't like how I speak about it. Maybe you don't like the marketing about it, right? And I can get into more in depth. So now their mentality is you owe me an explanation. Why did you say this? I look at them and I go, I don't work for you. You don't pay my bills. Who the F are you? Go F yourself. This is the entitlement environment we all have, right? Is that, well, and then because I answered them that way, or another thing is too, is this, I always tell people this, I go, every time I give you my time for free, all my paying clients are getting robbed. So how do you get my time for free? You say something that goes against what I say and now we're arguing. Meanwhile, my paying clients are like, I pay you a lot of money, but the way
Ciao,
to get your
Astrid.
time
Tschüss. Keep going.
but the
Yeah.
way to get your time for free is just to say something that you disagree with. So and now we go back and forth. So but if I say, well, catch me at a live event because at least you've paid to be there. You're supporting and I'm already paid to be there. You're giving back to the field, or pay my consulting fee and we can talk as much as you want. Nobody wants to hear that. They interpret that as as, well, you're just an asshole, or clearly that means you don't know how to address my argument because you are just pushing it away. Oh no, I've heard your argument 1,000 times because you're just playing around on Facebook. I'm with the heavy hitters at every conference. What do you think we're all talking about all the time? And I deal with 1,000 of those people at conferences, right? So it's just, I've learned there's no ROI on it anymore. But the issue is that it's the attitude that that's where I'm pushing back a little bit, is that people don't owe us explanations, and because they don't give us our time when we disagree, it doesn't mean that they can't back up their points. But I've found that usually is if you address one point, then they make another point, and then it becomes 3 points, and the threads go from this long to this long, and it just goes nowhere. So I said that to say this, and then I'll shut up for a bit. The one thing that I've learned is that we're all speaking to our audience, and people also interpret when you try to be the debunker, right? So-and-so did this, you see that? You can do that about Hollywood stars. Like, nobody cares if you debunk Jillian Michaels, right? Most trainers think she's, full of it. And she's already made $1 gazillion. She's sort of like in a category where nobody thinks you're punching down, or nobody thinks you're fighting for territory, or any of that shit that people come up with. But if it's just you talking about me or me talking about you, all people want to see is they just want to see us dance, right? They just want to see us fight for their entertainment. They're not going to remember anything. And the people who already agree with you are going to back you. The people who already agree with me are going to back me. And, so I'd rather provide opinions. I think you can be honest and just say, look, in my field, if you train with me, I wouldn't do this for this reason.
Yeah.
And here's why. I haven't seen research on this, or this so-and-so saying this study. I've seen a couple other studies that go, so maybe the evidence is equivocal, so I don't think you can have strong opinions on it. So you can speak with conviction without just sort of playing the, I am the authority, and you must answer to me. I have to say, I really hate that about the modern day vibe. And believe me, it turns on you quick, because once people see you doing it to other people, they go, oh, you think you're so smart. I can't wait to challenge you on your thing. And it just becomes this very disloyal, the way you think you come up is just, I don't know. We feel like we're more, I'm going to use the wrong term here. We think it makes us more objective when we disagree with things. Now, it's a very interesting thing because we're so entitled to it. So I just say, don't try to play police. Enjoy discussions, but understand that not everybody's speaking to the same audience. And sometimes they're just getting better at marketing. I've realized I used to try to be more detailed. Now I'm actually more simple, because people weren't asking me for references. It was like the one guy who was asking me for
Nobody
references,
cares.
right?
Nobody cares.
And he wasn't the guy that was buying my shit. Right? And the
They don't care.
So
They don't care.
I just realized, I'm going, you know what? I'm holding myself to this standard that is not my own standard. It's other people, this random person who's never buying my shit anyway. But meanwhile, I got all these people that says I've helped them so much. You know what? I'm going to focus on them. So again, open discussion is good. Be challenged, learn from things, but understand, if you're the challenger, that you're playing an away game. You're not playing a home game. Everybody in that forum is wearing someone else's jersey. And if you go in there, start cheering for your team, don't expect a positive result, or don't expect the people to go along with your cheers.
100%. Yeah, I see that. Where I might differ in my viewpoint a little bit is, you've said it, that there's a couple of things to unpack here. The first thing that just jumped into my mind is, you said, as you were gaining notoriety, people were like, hey, Nick, rah, 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 right?
Sure.
I think to a certain extent, isn't this the result of becoming public property? Right? Just like the celebrities.
Your words aren't yours anymore. Your words aren't yours anymore.
It's people they start owning you to a certain extent, because you're now a public figure. So therefore, people will have lots of opinions thrown at you because you're out in public. So I think this is a luxury problem to have for some folks, because most of us are grinding all day, every day, not getting any traction at all. And then once somebody makes it above, like the top of the cream, making more money, becoming more successful, building the business, growing the business, of course the light shines on you, so more people were going to have a conversation about you. I think this is just the lot of being successful and growing in notoriety. That's one thing, right? And you've mentioned about I've read a couple of books. I've always been that way, but now that I'm reading a lot of books about Bruce Lee, I understand that I fully, wholeheartedly embrace what Bruce Lee was saying. I like his mentality. One of the things that he shared was the 3 stages of cultivation, where he says in the first stage, you are the innocent and instinctive. You're not scientific, but you move, you express your body. Okay, that's totally fine. Then the next stage is you become very mechanic, because you're now in the stage of information and instruction. You have to learn things. You have to discard your own personality, but you have to learn about the movements. And then stage 3, this is where masters reside, the stage of innovation and inspiration. Now you're free, you understand it to a certain extent, and now you venture out on your own. And the funny thing is, then you get back to stage 1, becoming innocent and instinctive. And this is, I love this analogy. And where this led me to is that I do not want to have debates. I want to have discussions. And I want to add, I have this image in front of me of this huge table with ideas, and I want to throw my ideas on the table. Then we can all have a fruitful, and this is the most important adjective of it, a fruitful discussion, or we can add to each other's viewpoints. Not because my idea is not to be right. My idea is to go down the rabbit hole of truth, to understand what this is all about. And when I see things that don't make sense, I talk about it in a way, at least I think I do it like this. I can always improve, but I think I'm doing it in a sense of adding to the discussion instead of attacking the guru, if that makes sense, right?
That's great.
But here comes the big but. I know how YouTube works. So if I say the kettlebell snatch from Strong First is, biomechanically speaking, not the most efficient way to snatch a kettlebell, nobody's going to watch it.
Yeah.
Right? But if I say the Strong First snatch sucks, right, people are watching it, right?
So
let me finish my point. This is very important. And if I, let's say, 10 years down the line, I have risen to the kettlebell throwing guy, right? And everybody has their opinion about me. This is the result of my work. When we have a discussion with everybody that I had on this podcast who are kettlebell nerds, Pavel Tsatsouline seeps into the conversation almost every time. Just like probably when you talk to bodybuilding nerds, Eugene Sandow will probably seep into the conversation, right? Because these guys were instrumental in putting the kettlebell on the map. So I consider myself standing on the shoulders of giants, but I also think that we can have a discussion if everything that Pavel says holds true, or if we can challenge it to a certain extent and say, well, I see it differently. Why? Well, here's my point. Like you said, maybe some studies. And just for the record, we almost have no scientific evidence when it comes to kettlebells, which makes kettlebell training fairly dogmatic and makes it that, well, my crew says this, and I have proof to point, and I have proof to prove my point, and then the other guy says, well, I have proof as well. So we lack some scientific grounding where we can understand, okay, listen, the snatch to nerd out, for the snatch from my perspective is a cardiovascular exercise, not a power exercise. It is cardiovascular in nature because we do multiple reps with momentum, with the inertia that has nothing to do with the eccentric load, for example. It's all about working with the ballistic. You get where I'm coming from? So that's just right.
Yeah, it's more central conditioning than local muscle conditioning. I agree with that. So real quick point about what you were talking about, the YouTube titles.
Yeah.
There's an old saying in business: you either have a product problem or a marketing problem, and it's much easier to have a marketing problem than it is to have a product problem, right? Well, you have two basically groups of trainers. You have trainers who are not very knowledgeable but are great marketers, and then people
Exactly.
learning from them, right? So of course, if you're learning from not very knowledgeable trainers or great marketers, they're the ones everybody knows, and they're all the ones that are the more scientific or more technical trainers are always trying to shit on. But the funny thing is that the ones who are the scientific trainers, the authority, the thought police, which they have the right thing. They say,
Yeah.
look, I've been doing this I'm a professor of
Yeah.
this, that, and the other. I've been training for 20 years. I know better.
Yeah.
The reason why that nobody knows about them as much, or they're only talking about the same people, is because they view good marketing as dishonesty, and they don't understand that this is part of it now. And on the other side of it, people will hang up on your title, right? And it's like you got to realize when you're watching a video, you might provide a 10-minute video, and yes, it was called the so and so kettlebell thing sucks, and then you could even start right off the bat and say, okay, everybody, it doesn't really suck.
That's what exactly what I
Here's what
did.
I
Yes.
mean. Here's what I mean.
Exactly.
But then we're so entitled that we
Yeah.
just go, oh, the kettlebell doesn't suck, whatever. So it's like, did you listen to what I said? But again, like I
Yes.
said,
Yes. Mm.
so what I'm trying to do, my whole point, and everything I said previously, was to get more thoughtful trainers who are trying to have these debates, who are trying to have these discussions. I'd rather have more of you in the field than the people who don't care, who just watch YouTube and a little bit of TikTok and think that's continuing education. But we need to be more humble about where we come from. I'm going to expand on that in a little bit. And that we're talking to somebody who works for themselves, who has other people, and now we're coming to them and acting like they owe us an explanation, or we have to talk like them, speak like them. And this is why I'm going to say, so my next point is that yes, you should be passionate, you should want to have the discussions, but social media is the worst place for it, because I'll give you two big examples. One is that if you don't know somebody, you don't know where their intentions are, you automatically are going to have a more defensive perspective. It's me against you versus us together. Here's the best proof, right? I'll be the first one. I admit this. I know it's a controversial topic. This is who I am, whatever. I'm a firearm guy. I like to train with firearms. I've been around it all my life. I don't wear a lot of firearm related shirts, but occasionally I'll have a shirt that has like an AR-15 on it or whatever. Okay. Or maybe an American flag or whatever. That's just who I am. I don't push it on things. If somebody I didn't know came up to me and was like, fuck guns, bro, I'm going to look at them and I'm like, I'm going to be one step a little closer to going, do I need to watch out for this dude? Am I going to end up fighting this guy? Like, this is like an aggressive mark. But if it's you and you know me, I know you're saying that in like a sarcastic, busting my balls way, right? So because I don't know you and your intentions, the way I interpret that initial interaction is a completely different thing. Well, most interactions on social media are from strangers with photos, and I don't even know if your profile pic is real, or maybe it's your business. That's A. B is I work for myself for a reason. I work for myself so I don't have to answer to other people, so I can do it my way. I can speak how I want. I can listen to the music how I want. I can interpret things how I want. And I have people in my phone who I trust on certain subjects. And now you're some random person and you have to tell me who you are. I'll be like, I don't know how good you are. I know how good my friend is, who's a professor at so-and-so. And he and I talked about this for 2 hours. And this is the conclusion that we came from. But you're talking to me as if I'm a dumbass. Right. So that's another problem. Not when I say you, I mean the general you.
Yeah,
So
most
this
definitely.
is why social media is the worst platform to have these discussions. So again, I would say keep that in mind when you're approaching people. There are ways to approach it to say, hey, I've heard from so and so, kettlebell guy, this is the way to do it, but I'm interested in hearing your perspectives on that if you're willing to share. That at least is a more appreciative, it's more of an opening platform. It's more of an us thing. So again, there are ways to speak with conviction and disagree without being adversarial.
I see
And
where it comes
also
from. Yeah.
understanding that people talk differently in regards to how they communicate things.
Yes.
If
Yeah.
you're a professor and you work in an academic environment, and then you debate me, and I'm talking the way and I'm familiar with how they talk, by the way, but I just don't like to talk about that because I feel like it's not productive, and a lot of people don't understand it. We're going to disagree. You might not like, I might make a very simple claim, that's not a great exercise. Well, what does great mean? There's no context for that. Well, I just mean in general, for most people, I don't use it. It's harder to learn, whatever. Well, the so-and-so research says this. Well, I don't care what the research says. I'm telling you what practical says. Now we have to
Experience. Yeah.
argue about
Yes.
how important is research and how important is
Yeah.
practical.
I
And
see
I
that.
flip-flop depending on the subject, right?
Yes.
Depending
Yes.
on So again, we can't even have this debate about this one thing until we establish all our other presuppositions and what our values are and where are we coming from. Great example. Ben Bruno is somebody who I consider a friend. I don't talk to him every Tuesday or anything like that. I've known him for years. So a lot of people thought Ben and I had an issue with each other because he always says burpees suck, and I think burpees are okay and they get a bad reputation and blah, blah, blah. Okay, we don't need to get into that debate. I've done videos addressing everybody's counterpoints, right? So people are always trying to, and he and I would get on the phone and laugh about it. And he goes, what people don't realize is I'm speaking to my audience. He goes, my audience is mostly women who watch Chelsea Handler, who's one of his most famous clients. And most of them would look terrible if they try to do a burpee. So I just tell them burpees suck. He goes, but if you got I'm gonna ad lib, I'm gonna adapt a little bit. But if you're a 20-year-old and you're a wrestler, and I'm not saying wrestlers are burpees are wrestling specific. What I mean is, like, you're a very athletic individual. You have good mobility. Yeah, you could do some burpees. They're not going to kill you. And so people forget that because we don't provide all this context because it doesn't work in social media, right? So again, there's so many aspects to this that's why I just say sometimes you just gotta, I always say it's live and let live, train and let train, address people to try to learn from them. But it's the judgment part that I get concerned with, and the whole idea of the best ideas, win. No, they don't. The best marketing wins, and the best ideas is also in the eye of the beholder. Now, I'm not a subjective. I do believe there's objective things. All right, certain things have very strong evidence, other things don't. Other things make good common sense, other things don't. I'm not saying everything is relative. I'm not a relativist. What I mean by that is that different people are looking for different things spoken in a different way. For example, if you're just a trainer who's fairly beginning and you're just confused about things, you don't want to hear a lot of research. You just go, hey, just tell me what to do. Is spinal flexion good or is it bad? Well, it depends. They don't want to hear it depends. Just tell me. For most
I see.
people, right?
100%.
So,
It
and if you
depends.
start going
Yeah.
into
I love
studies,
this.
so sometimes if you just go, in general, I have no problem with it. But if people have flexion intolerance, then of course you wouldn't do it. You provide a simple answer. For
Yeah.
them, that's why they follow you. They follow you because you
Yes.
provide simple answers to complex topics that apply
Yes.
for most people, right? So yes, well that there's outliers, and for some people, well, so and so champion boxer in 1970 did 2,000 crunches a day. Great. I'm not saying or you can go both ways.
Yes.
We forget about those aspects of it, where the other person is very scientific and they want you to speak how they speak. All right. Final point in this regard. And this is why I say you can't necessarily say that, oh, the best ideas, or if I see something that doesn't make sense, I'm going to call it out. Okay. You're a trainer who came up, and most of the people that you followed are very functional 3D, right? So you're a Naughty Aguilera, Paul Chek kind of guy. Naughty is just the new Paul Chek, right? So now, if you see a person who's doing more bodybuilding type training, to you, what they do does not make sense. It doesn't make sense because they don't use your language, they don't use your assessments, they don't value what you value. So you feel like that they are causing harm because you've been told that isolation could increase your risk of injury, and you're not addressing all these three-dimensional patterns, and all training has to look like this. So you think you're more in the moral rights to say, well, you are doing harm if I don't call you out. Now, on the flip side, you can take a person who's a little bit more biomechanically knowledgeable and says, well, the average person just wants to get fit and build some muscle and look better. And if they start doing that, they'll be more encouraged to do it again. But if I start doing everything with rotation and cables and things, there's not enough load to build your biceps up and to build your glutes up and to do all the things you want to do. Therefore, if they train with you, functional guy or girl, you are doing harm because you're not giving people the value that they want. So now I can now hold what you're doing doesn't make sense to me, and I can hold you accountable in my level of superiority because of what you're doing. You understand the problem now. So if you ask trainers, what are the basics? You're going to get a different view from a power lifter, from a kettlebell person, from a functional training person, from a corrective person. So this is why I continue to say that we have to be careful going in and saying, well, that doesn't make sense. I got to call it out, and I got to. Depends on how you are valuing it and your own school of thought, which is why I go back to a lot of this gets solved when we eliminate our school of thought and we go from what problem are we addressing? If it's easier to discuss, if you say, I got a client whose knees hurt when they squat and lunge, when they go past a certain degree. Now we have a better discussion because all of us are on the same page as where are we trying to get to? But if the goal is, well, I've been taught that everybody needs to, proper training is standing with rotation and unilateral movement because it looks like locomotion or throwing. And the other person because train movements, not muscles. And another person came up from a school of thought, and this thought was, well, you have to isolate before you integrate because you're only as strong as your weakest link. Those two things are mutually incompatible. Or I go to a corrective class and I go to PRI, and PRI teaches me everything is based on breathing and rib cage position. Someone else starts off with corrective exercise and they go to a foot specialty course, and everybody says, well, your feet are the first point of ground contact. Therefore, everything comes from the feet. So if you don't fix the feet first, nothing else happens right up the chain. Those two thought processes are mutually incompatible. It either starts at the breathing or it starts at the feet. You can't have it both ways. So this is why we have to humble ourselves and go, just because it doesn't make sense to me doesn't mean, because it tends to be about inflicting your school of thought on someone else. And this is the most of the training arguments I see. They are not about solving problems. They are about my school of thought is better than yours, and I need to hold you accountable because I've been taught by my school of thought that everything starts at the ribs, and you're saying everything starts at the feet. That can't be right. So you must answer to me. That's not going to get far.
I see your points, and I see it a little bit differently, but that's why I appreciate this conversation. The battle of school of thoughts is, and let's start with intent first. This is very hard to grapple with. Like Bruce Lee says, and like I've learned now throughout working with so many people in my career that we have here, is understanding that, just for example with the swing, right? Hey, it doesn't look perfect. Just learn the hinge, then push the hip thrust the weight up, catch it with your arms, wait until you reconnect, and it's awesome. Looks different than mine, totally fine, right? This is there's not the perfect way, yes. And so I like how Bruce Lee said it. He says, be humble in heart, but powerful in your work. So where I would come from is my understanding of a current thing. And I think that's what science does. But funny thing is, yesterday I talked to a scientist who said, well, science gets it wrong all the time, and the problem is not the science itself. Problem is how science is conducted. And then sometimes you battle against these institutions who, for example, lactate. For 200 years, it was almost impossible to go against it. But thank God he did, because it advanced the field. And he said science is a very slow-moving horse, so it takes time. So from this perspective, let's just imagine that Professor Roberts didn't go against the lactate idea, right? Because I don't feel the need to challenge, right? Or it doesn't make sense to go against these guys because it's already established. Or, oh, I'm going to wiggle, some people will get mad if I say this, blah, 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 blah. But he did it anyway. And I think here is the crucial part where I wholeheartedly agree on all your points. Here's the only point where I differ is intent matters. If it comes from a humble, exploring heart who really wants to go about, I've been learned in certain ideas and trained in certain ideas. And I love the bodybuilding functional aspect of it. You've hit the nail on the on its head, because let's call it us, the functional guys, we say, hey, listen, the body likes it when you move it in its unity. Don't just isolate the stuff, because what good is it to have a big biceps if you can't even do a solid squat because you squat all day, blah, 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 right? Okay, so see that. And the bodybuilding guys will say, but like you said, hey, but what about somebody who wants to have a big biceps? And here is the important common denominator where I say, well, the goal decides on what you have to train and how you have to train. And here is where I even here's where I ultimately know the limitations of kettlebells, where I'm saying, listen, it's a weight. You can manipulate it however you want according to the laws of building muscle, and you build muscle. Grab it and then do biceps curls with some intensity sets until you burn out every other day, and boom, here you go. You'll build your biceps. Of course, it's a weight. Manipulate it however you want it, right? Do it. But it's just like trying to eat a piece of steak with a knife. Of course you can, but it's probably not the best intended use of the knife, right? Let's use a fork. It's a better way to do it. So where I come from is, guys, you want to look like a bodybuilder, like a true physique guy? Forget the kettlebell. It's about machines, dumbbells, cable pulleys, because that stuff touches your muscles right on these points where you can trigger hypertrophy the most, according to science. So let's not try to reinvent the wheel and say the kettlebell does everything. Where I come from is where I think the kettlebell is so powerful is because it touches all these spaces a little bit, to a certain extent. And this is where most of our clients, what they need, a little bit of muscle, a little bit of coordination, a little bit of endurance. And I love how you said a variety. For example, most of the exercises that we use, it's like 10 to 15 exercises throughout the whole year, but we mix them up a little bit different, a little bit of a variation here. Then we change the AMSAT method, we use a Tabata method, then we use a circuit method. We do all types of things. And what our clients really love about the kettlebell, and this is where I differ in my train of thinking from the typical RKC Strong First stuff, is where I'm saying I put people first, but I see the potential of kettlebells, and then we do swings, clean and press and snatch for 6 minutes straight, 2 minutes per exercise, and then I have lots of time and attention. People get that feeling. It's like the hunter-gatherer method. They start sweating. They have their brain has to work. They love it. These endorphins. They love it. They enjoy it. I think this is where the kettlebell shines the most, especially with the ballistics. But of course, you're telling me you want to become the strongest? I think the best way to do it is pick up a barbell. You can incrementally load it, way more conducive to building strength than picking up 292 kg kettlebells, which are very high. So of course, if you lift them up from that very high place, you don't have the same range of motion like a deadlift with a barbell, where the plates touch the floor. It's way lower. So I do understand these perspectives. So I think, doesn't the intent matter of where somebody comes in and wants to have a fruitful discussion? And I see your point about owing somebody an explanation, and I have to differ a little bit with social media, because I've learned a lot from my YouTube section, from my YouTube comment section. We have close to 100,000 subscribers now, and because of the way that I act and the way that I am, I wasn't like this all the time. I've changed lots over the years, but because I'm on that inquiry of truth where I want to learn, and then maybe, dish out some challenges for the fun of it, right? And have a little bit of drama because YouTube likes it. We play it for the algorithm, yes. But at the end of the day, I love the tool so much, like you love your intention of how you got into training so much. I'm now so in love with kettlebells that I want to go down that route. And if you love a tool, you most definitely understand its value and its limitations. And what I've learned from the YouTube community from our end, engaging into some of the discussions, I got feedback from people all around the world using kettlebells for 10, 20 years. I got feedback from veterans, from cyclists, from MMA guys, from everybody all around the world, understanding what the kettlebell can do, understanding what it cannot do, and then we had great discussions. But I get the trolls all the time. I get them. And these are the people who want to troll on you most of the time. And of course, you don't owe them an explanation. But here's another beautiful thing that I've discovered. Sometimes I've engaged with these people, and after a couple of comments down the line, they were like, bro, I'm sorry. I was just heated up because I love this guy so much that you shared your opinion about, but I see your
Sure.
point.
Yeah. No, we're actually saying the same thing. What you say is, I said you focus on, if you're having a debate, you focus on what the problem that you're trying to solve is versus inflicting your school of thought on. What I was saying is that a lot of these debates become that. But what I was keying in on was, I don't think you use these exact words, but basically we're talking about holding someone else accountable for something, I should better call that out, sort of thing. That's where I get concerned, because as soon as we do that, we're sort of positioning ourselves as the, you have to, because I'm protecting others, right, from this misinformation that you're saying.
Yeah.
So all the
But if I
points
may,
that I was bringing up, well, hang on, all the points I was bringing up where I was just saying that how our school of thought or our approach can or the things that we don't know about where that person's coming from can misinterpret us trying to protect as just someone is coming from a different perspective, and there's not an objective. It's not like we can just say, hey, look, 5 research studies have showed this is bullshit, right? So a lot of these discussions aren't that easy. And then of course other people. So anyway, it was more about just the staying a little bit more humble and say, okay, before I sort of start wagging the finger and go, you are a purveyor of misinformation and I must protect everybody and call you out. I see a lot of that misses, and that's where I say those things on social media don't go well.
I see that.
Interactions on social media, discussions, feedback. Hey, I'd like you to hear more about this. I've heard that. That is great, and I agree with you. We should enjoy that, but the way to enjoy that and cultivate that is by doing what you're doing, is creating a forum where nobody feels like they're going to get the finger wagged at.
Exactly.
Right, and that's
100%.
where so we're talking about the same thing.
I think so too.
It's taking yourself away from the position of I am holding you accountable, and more along the lines of just like, I'm really curious to know why you believe that. I've heard some other things.
Yes.
I'm going to look into that. Not this whole like, oh, clearly you don't have an answer then, and then screenshotting it on your. So I reached out to so and so, and this was his reply. Can you believe that?
Can you believe this?
And it's like, you mean you asked that guy for his time for free, and when he told you to F off, he's the asshole? Yeah. Wow. This is the world we're in right now.
I see that. And this is social media is fostering this type of behavior, most definitely.
Yeah, that's my funny thing is, man. It's like, wow, it's like you're the asshole. You demanded somebody else's time for free.
It's like freaking so many times.
Them an asshole, and you basically insulted them in your inquiry. Why would they even give you your time anyway? You've already determined who they are.
And here's the next level. It's free content, bro. Scroll if you don't like it. Check out somebody else. It's like some of the times we get these comments where my blood starts boiling a little bit, because it's like, hey, you should show us now this and this and that. Or for example, the recent workout that I did, right? Clean and press, a squat, a swing, a burpee, and then the first comment be like, well, where's the swing? Well, it's not in there, so who cares, man? Add it if you want. You should add the snatch first. Well, why? Why? Because when I did it, the kettlebell snatch, the kettlebell landed on my head. I was like, well, there's probably a lack of skill or maybe loaded capacity problem. Not that the snatch is at last, but I get where you're coming from, most definitely. Yeah. And I think this place of humility where people can feel free to share their opinions, and where somebody just comes up with a different idea and shares something, I think this is sometimes what people and maybe even the old timers to a certain extent misunderstand, because in order for somebody to, in this crowded place that we live in order for somebody to get a little bit of recognition and maybe hear the nuanced perspective that this guy or this gal has, maybe you need to hit him with a little bit of a algorithm title, right? Gregory von Leberstock is an idiot. That's what he said. Nick doesn't know. Nick Tuminello is stupid. He doesn't know all right? And then you're like, and then he gives you a nuanced perspective, right? We shouldn't hate the player, we should hate the game, because the game is rigged towards that way, that you have to make a little bit of noise. And I do understand where you're coming from. And you've mentioned something a little while back, this it depends notion. And I had a lot of guys on the podcast where I was like, yeah, but how would you recommend, you're a back pain specialist, what kind of exercises would you recommend for somebody with back pain? Well, this completely depends on the person. I'm like, yeah, but just give me some basic feedback, because, and then I said, if it depends is the magna cum laude of what we're supposed to do with fitness, and this is the absolution, then we should stop writing books.
Exactly.
Because books at the end of the day are recommendations for somebody with a lot of experience. And so when people ask us, it's always like, listen, what kind of kettlebell should I get started with? Well, a man, 12 kg is probably a good place to start. 8 kg for a woman, probably a good place to start. Oh, great, thank you. Well, I found out the 12 kg is a little bit heavy. Well, we found that some men who are maybe a little bit older, or a little bit more, have a little bit more a banged up body, maybe start with an 8 or a 10. Totally fine. But people want some clear feedback. And I love because this is what the science guys sometimes mess up. It's like, guys, you want to share us all these, but the methods were wrong. Yeah, but this wasn't good. Yeah, but that dude was. But did you see the acknowledgments? This guy was sponsored by. Yeah, but just give me the gist of it, and then I can make up my own mind, right?
Yeah, well, you and I have the same frustrations, man.
Most definitely. And about the burpee, let me tell you, when I started incorporating the burpee, because I really fell in love with burpees a couple of months ago, and now I incorporate them on a regular basis. And by the way, I got that from you, because people were like, yeah, but McGill says that, and by the way, I had Professor McGill on the podcast, and he said, but McGill says burpees are bad. I said, well, why are they bad? Well, because of the back, blah, 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 blah. So I went a little bit on research. I was like, I don't see anything, so okay, that's one thing. Then I saw your post, and I enjoyed it. I was like, let's do a gorilla burpee. Squat down, hands down, jump back. Make sure you land in a wide position so that you have no pressure on the lower back, totally fine. What we even do with complete beginners and older people is just hands down, both of your legs, one step back, lay on the floor. Now shift your whole body back on your knees, and now stand up. Because this is like a basic skill that you maybe need one day. You lay on your back, on the floor, and you have to get up. Forget the jumping, just down and up, right? So modifying it according to your client's needs, exactly what you've shared in the beginning, right?
Yeah, and I like that I think for yourself, and I like that you are a Bruce Lee fan. Obviously, you know, if you've been following my work, I'm a big Bruce Lee fan. So I think you and I are on the same page on a lot of the philosophical thing. But this takes me to a point about a lot of this stuff is attitudinal disposition. You know, you're someone who wants to learn from a lot of people and then add your own spin on it, and you're not necessarily going to put too much weight on it because of who said it, right? Prime example, you're not afraid to challenge what Pavel said because you're not accusing him of being dishonest or anything. You're accusing him of being human, right? You're just saying, I understand you sold a lot of books and a lot of DVDs, and I'm not recognizing your influence. But just because you stood there in khaki pants and said "comrade" 1,000 times on a DVD does not mean I have to put my head up your ass, you know. And it doesn't mean that you can do no wrong. And now, but again, here's the debate divergence. Some people will dig that, right? So if you see me say that, you go, I'm going to follow this guy. You know, we got a unique thinker here. He's not just spouting all. He's not just the cheesy cover band of Mike Boyle or JC Santana. He's his own guy, right? I always tell people, I go, you know, some people make original music. Other people are tribute bands in fitness. All right. I'm nobody's tribute band.
Yes,
okay.
Tribute bands. Exactly.
So yeah. So if you came to me to say you want to hear me say what Dan John says, I'll go, Dan John is an amazing coach. But if you want to hear Dan John,
talk to Dan John.
Talk to Dan John. If you want to hear Dan John's words come out of my mouth, you're at the wrong place, right? So certain things I'm going to say I agree with, other things I'm going to say I'm not, and I don't even agree. This idea that disagreement is bad and somehow means we don't like one another. I tell people, I don't even agree with myself on certain things 10 years ago. I still like myself. You know what I mean? So it's just like, this is the problem with, and so I'll say this too. This is why I think, again, it's all about the attitude and the vibe. It should be a together. The whole, I think I want you to, if there's anything I can bring up all this together, my whole vibe is that we absolutely need to have disagreement on things, but it needs to be approached as, you don't have to answer to me. I demand you justify yourself. you are doing harm and misinformation.
Yeah, you're
exactly. Gotta stop. That shit's gotta stop.
Gotta stop.
You just gotta say, I
have
to say, you gotta say, hey, look, I've heard some different things, and to be honest with you, I'm a little bit some of these things you're saying kind of worry me, but this is based on what I've learned. So I'd really like to know, appreciate people's time, do it together. And then when you get to a certain point, you just go, okay, I appreciate your time. You've given me some things to think about. And that will go far than the other way around. And the thing is that not being around people who disagree with you, it hurts you. The people who are actually, I would say this is going to sound very self-gratifying to me and for you. But when you are constantly around people who disagree with you, or you don't necessarily, you feel like you're a man without a country in fitness, you go, well, I took the RKC course, but I'm not going to wear RKC shirts, and I disagree on A, B, and C. And I took the Kettlebell Concepts course, and I like this, and this is a little bit different than I learned at RKC and the Strong First, but I reject that, and I think that's stupid. I think that's great. When you're constantly around a lot of people who disagree with you, you get really good at defending your positions and evaluating yourself. How can I be wrong about this?
Exactly.
That person
That's
had a
my
good
point.
that person had a good perspective on this. I got to think about that. I'm not really sure how I can address that. But it's the people who aren't dealing with that worry me, because they're not hearing it. But you know what? Some people aren't trying to hear that. Some people just go, you know what? I got a full roster. I got 20 clients. I'm good. They come with me 2-3 times a week. I'm making my 100K. I take a couple vacations a year. I got a nice car. Why do I need to argue with you about biomechanics? I'm just trying to build my online thing, because I want to eventually better move to Australia or whatever. So I don't need to who are you, kettlebell guy? I don't need to justify you, I'm not talking to you.
And Nick, this is exactly my point. It's when this is what I was talking about with the table of ideas. You've brought a great point. Well, but the bodybuilding guy will always, to a certain extent, disagree with the kettlebell guy because they have different intentions. Yeah. Sometimes where I don't really connect, where I have a hard time to connect, is when somebody says, it all starts here.
Right.
I'm like, really? We are a very complex organism. Why are you saying it starts in the toe? It starts in the foot. It starts in the gait mechanics, right? This is where I'm a little bit careful with that. But what you just said is exactly what I mean. When you get to hear these points, you have to reevaluate your position. You have to have your arguments laid in front, and then logic is combating your arguments. And if you cannot defend them, again, in a fruitful conversation, you are forced, if you are an honest human being, to adjust your opinion and to adjust your mindset. Like, well, this guy, this is right. You're right. Yeah, but you did that video. Yeah, but I learned some stuff. Right?
Yeah.
So this is the major difference, where I see where I come from the point of wanting to learn, and exactly how you describe it. I respect my sensei Steve Carter, most definitely. There's things that I see differently than he does. But that's normal. And this is what Bruce Lee is saying, right? He says, don't agree or disagree, but grow. When I read this yesterday, I was like, this is exactly it. This is not about disagreement. It's about, listen, I have this idea. What's your idea? What do you think about it? And now, because we live in the dawn of social media, we have to package it differently. This is the problem. And this is where I agree wholeheartedly, where some people will take it the wrong way no matter what. And I see this on my channel all the time. And funny thing is, the things that, and people say this, you're calling out, right? And I'm like, yeah, you probably consider it calling out, but from my intent, I just have a different perspective. But because the title and the thumbnail looks like this, you think I'm calling the guy out. But if you hear me out, I'm always giving a little bit more of a nuanced perspective. Because this is how the game is rigged, right? So that's exactly what I want. I want to talk to people who see it completely differently than I do. I want to hear their points, then elaborate my points. And if my person that's sitting on the opposite side is just as honest as I am about it, then we can learn. But here is the big problem, right? And this is what Bruce Lee was fighting against too. He was like, styles, if people are stuck in styles, you're just stuck in a better cage. You should become free to a certain extent. Expand on your own mind. And this is what you said as well, right? Is take what you think is cool, discard what you don't think is valuable, and then move on.
Yeah, but you got to keep in mind that you're in a small percentile of trainers who, again, most of them just go, look, I got a a lot of clients, I see all you guys arguing and you guys can't even
Yeah, I
settle
see
on
that.
anything.
I see that.
I'm just going to keep on doing what I'm doing. And
I
I'm just
see
going to
that.
gravitate to who speaks to me in my language. Right.
Agree.
And that's always going to be stronger. So, and that's what I'm saying. That's why I tell a lot of the people who really have a strong message and put that much thought into it. I'd love to hear those people would value from you, but a lot of times we don't know how to talk to them because we're almost overthinking it. And
Agree.
for example, right, if you were a martial artist all your life, you're going to gravitate more towards a functional 3D, movement approach. If you started lifting and then even if you did the world's dumbest, overtraining program and you hurt your back lifting, you're going to think lifting causes damage, right? So then anybody who is not really big on barbells, that's going to click with you, man, because you're
Yeah,
dancing to
yeah.
the music that you wanted to hear,
Agree.
right?
Agree.
If you came up always wanting to be big and strong, and you watched a karate black belt in 1981 try to fight some kid on the football team, and the kid just who was just like big and strong just grabbed the karate guy and slammed him down. By the way, I've heard this exact story, and punched him, and that was that. You think, I'm just going to get huge. So anybody who's just talking about moving and be wiry, you're going to go, that's nonsense. Just get big. Because that
Get big. I
experience,
see that
is going to be
wholeheartedly.
stronger because it's closer to your heart than anything else anybody's going to say to you. But look at news. We want to, if I'm a far right person, I want to hear news in a far right spin. If I'm a far left person, I want to hear news in a far left spin. We can all talk about how, well, nobody's telling us the news anymore and letting us, they're telling us what to think about the news. Guess what? You said don't hate the player, hate the game. Guess what? The most prominent news channels on TV and on social media are all directly biased towards one thing. So again, if you're the smart trainer who's like you, like attracts like, so other people who are like you are probably listening to this podcast. That is my practical advice: is understand you are not like most people. Not saying you're above them. What I mean is that you're putting way more thought and interest into this than a lot of other people are, because this is your hobby. They're probably going to go home and play guitar, or maybe they have other hobbies, right? But understand that sometimes you're not going to resonate with them if you try to, be too neutral. And I would say, piggybacking off what you said earlier, is I never liked the whole "it depends" thing. That's a start of a conversation, not an answer to a question. Tell me what it
100%.
depends on. Okay, it depends on if you have access to barbells. Okay, if I have access to barbells, then what does the
Yeah.
back squat being good depend on? Well, do you have the shoulder external rotation? Do you want more quads? Do you want more of this? You can be contextual if you answer a few more of those questions of
Yes.
what does it depend on, and then in a different case, and it depends on this. So that's driven me nuts. But I will say this: I've made an observation about you here, and I think that you and I have something else very similar. That we're both positive people. We love this field. We want to learn from people. But I think what got you, I'm going to make a guess, an educated guess, because I feel like we relate, because I'm sharing a little bit about me here. You asked me how I got started. Again, I talk about my energy and why. I actually started teaching trainers because I was not satisfied. That's the best word. I don't want to say disillusioned or mad, because I wasn't. I'm not, not satisfied with the teachers out there that I thought were teaching, right? I'm talking about the Mike Boyles, the Stu McGills, the JC Santanas. This is no disrespect to them. They helped me pave the way to who I am. But I didn't like that I didn't like that the science people were like giving me a 90-minute conference course on all research that I could look up myself. And then the last slide was like 3 practical things. I'm like, why didn't you just tell me that in the beginning and save me the hour? Right. So I didn't like that. I didn't like how the strength coaches, were super dogmatic. I would go, I'll tell you a 100% true story. I was at a Perform Better conference in 2004, 2005. Doesn't matter the exact date, it was around then. And Mike Boyle's on stage, and Mike Boyle finishes his class by saying, last 20 minutes, and the next speaker is going to be JC Santana. JC Santana is standing in the back of the room, packed house, right? And Mike Boyle said, the last exercises that most men should be doing is bench press, bicep curls and, biking outside of sprints, right? Because we're already sitting a lot and we already train the forward muscles. That was the whole premise right there. Sounds good. He gets off the stage. JC Santana hops on stage and he goes, y'all think I look pretty good for my age? I'm 50, whatever, and he's a pretty studly guy, still is. He said, I've had this hip replaced, this knee replaced. He goes, you think I look pretty good? And everybody goes, yeah. He goes, you know how I look like this? He goes, biceps, bench press, and bicycle, right? It was basically going directly against what Boyle said, right? Now, that was sort of the environment back then. I kind of dug that. But what I mean is that I kind of dug it, but at the same token, I know a lot of people here are confused by this because they want different names, but if two people are directly contradicting oneself, it becomes more confusing than anything else. And actually, they don't feel like you're helping me, right? So there's a way to approach that. He could approach that way better and just goes, look, I have to say I disagree with that. There's different, and what that does is it cultivates you to empower you. Hey, I don't necessarily have to agree with the guy on stage.
Yeah.
And the guy on stage is telling me that he appreciates that. That's how you cultivate that, right? But when you cultivate this clash environment, it sort of becomes, Democrat versus Republican, right versus left. So I was disillusioned by that. And the other thing I had a problem with was that most of the people teaching at these conferences were not trainers. They were working in clinics. They were working for teams, right? They were researchers. And if I'm working in a clinic, then everybody is, I think it's great. I want to learn research, but you're not communicating with me the way my clients are communicating. You don't have clients come in with 4 magazines and go, I want her legs, put that magazine down, flip it. I want her arms. Oh, that's a barbell? I don't want to do barbell. I'm not doing that today.
I don't want to look like a bodybuilder.
Yeah, you're not. And if I tell you, spot training is stupid, you're not doing, they're going to go away because I just told them they're dumb, right? So it's like, so that's one perspective. If you're a strength coach, you get to decide how your gym is designed. Your college gives you $1 million or so budget. You are the dictator, and the athletes have to do what you tell them, whether they like it or not. Otherwise, they're off the effing team. Like I said, you got hostages.
This is powerful.
If you work in the clinic, that client will do whatever you tell them to do because they have one goal. One goal is I need to get back to living my life the way I like it as fast as possible. If you tell me to bang my head against that wall while doing rotator cuff, I will bang my head against that wall. Right? Because I trust you. I don't know anything about this rehab process. None of these people are working in my environment. My environment is a luxury environment. It's a customer service based field that needs technical knowledge. It's more like a chef. We are more like chefs. People always want to look at like doctors and physios. Nah, we are more like chefs. First off, you have to have a great experience. Does the restaurant smell nice? Is it clean? Do people feel like they want to be there? Is it a hot place to be? Then you also have to have the technical knowledge to make really good food, right? But nobody's coming in that restaurant unless your product is good. But first thing that's going to get them in is, does it look cool? Does it look good? Right? That's the closest thing to our job. And I realized none of these people were doing that. So there was a lot of dogmatism. The strength coaches were, I don't care what science says. All I know, that was my favorite one. All I know is I've seen it work. And I'm like, well, I could take 3 supplements and 2 of them are sugar pills and one of them is creatine, and I'll get all the benefits that creatine monohydrate says. And then you're going to refer to me, you have to take these 3 supplements, when if you looked at research, you would know 2 of these are bullshit and I could save $500 a month. Right? So I was like, I don't like how the strength coaches reject science as it's behind, it's 10 years behind. No, it's not. It's not at all 10 years behind things. And then on the flip side, scientific guys don't even train anybody, and their communication was terrible, and they don't understand good marketing. So it was really me being disillusioned about, or frustrated about the far ends of these spectrums. And I went, there's a way to bring all this together. I can say, here's some research, cut to the chase. Now, here's how this has influenced my training, and still make it practical and address things that are happening in everyday environment. So that's why I started teaching, and I also didn't like how I was like, the guy who's teaching me right now, it's like, you realize I'm going to go into another room and there's going to be a guy who's sitting on stage who has just as much credentials as you, who's going to contradict you. Do you not realize that? Like, are you trying to do something to me? Or are you trying to do something for me? That's what I used to always want. I go, yeah, I feel like you're trying to get me to be afloat in your parade versus actually take in a lot of these things. Because if you really cared about what I was learning, you'd be paying attention and you'd be addressing that. And you'd go, hey, look, I'm not a fan of flexion exercises, but I've heard a couple people argue, they have some good points about this, but here's where I've come from. And you'd cultivate a diversity of views, not a camp thing.
Yeah.
So that's why that's what motivated me to teach, is actually, I didn't want to be like any of the people who came before me. So yeah, you say you stand on the shoulders of giants. I get it. You're respecting people, but a lot of what you're saying, and I don't want to put myself on you, I'm getting similar vibes to me, which is that a lot of the things that formed how you approach things as a teacher is based on things that you didn't like from the other people that you learned from.
I have to run now because I have a client coming up, but I'm gonna give you, I think this is 100% where we share the similarities. First of all, I was completely frustrated with the gym approach, the typical approach. It's like feeding people through this parkour and not caring at all, not even knowing their name when they come in.
Right.
And then just being there to listen to the problems a little bit, but then when you talk to them actually about training and stuff, your boss comes in and tells you 5 minutes per client, Gregory. I hated that. I was like, how are we supposed to help people? So that's number one. And number two, in the kettlebell sphere, what a little bit wasn't let's say motivated me was, okay, I get the skills, I get the knowledge, now I get the train, I have to do the fitness test, but you're not telling me how to teach it to people. That's very strange, right? So I have all this, and how do I teach this? And these guys say this, these guys say that. Yeah, but wait. I have over 50-year-olds who never moved in their life. Yeah. That's a completely different story. And but that's different. No. And you mentioned this. You always talk to the choir, guys. We always talk to ourselves. But if we talk to normal people, the ones that actually make you the money that you can live as a trainer, you have to change the whole conversation and have to adapt everything. So that's why I think, let's say, put it like this, I'm gonna have to do it differently. So that's the reason why I do what I do. But hey, Nick, what a powerful conversation. We definitely have to do this again, because I think we're bouncing back and forth with great ideas. And at the end of the day, I think we see things a little bit differently, but then we agree on the other hand. And maybe we say the same thing in different words, right? And that was such a powerful conversation. I truly appreciate your time, Nick. I know you're a heavyweight in the game, so I appreciate these 90 minutes with you. And if you're interested, we can do it again one day. You just let me know.
Sure, man. This is one of the most enjoyable conversations I've had in a while, and I love you have your perspectives on things. And otherwise, this thing is no fun if we're just singing each other's, slapping each other on the back.
Exactly.
So,
appreciate it.
Good.
We help aspiring kettlebell coaches become confident as kettlebell practitioners and educators in only 10 weeks. If you want to find out more about our method, check the first link in the description and sign up for our waiting list.